Hi there. This is John from John's Record Collection. This is box number 19, Toby Lurie to Rod McKuen. Hello. Here I am with another box. We're moving from the last of the L's into the M's. So this is word music, the poetry of Toby Lurie. So this is kind of a poetry record. I could probably use a better cover on this one, but it's a good one to have since I like poetry records. And let's see. I think I just got this one for the title. It's called Dashing Through the Church by the Lutherans, as in Lutherans. I'm from Minnesota, so there's a lot of records about Lutherans and whatnot. So I think I just got this one for the title. Arthur Lyman. So if you are an exotica fan, you have to look into Arthur Lyman. So Arthur Lyman was the vibraphone player for Martin Denny. Martin Denny being a founder of the exotica genre. And so since Arthur Lyman was more of a vibraphone player, who was more of a jazz instrument, he's kind of a more smooth jazz version of exotica. Although, it's 50s smooth jazz, so it's not like the corporate post-1980s smooth jazz. But it's very chill music, very Hawaiian in flavor. So this is Hawaiian Sunset Volume 2. I have a bunch of, let's see, how many other Arthur Lyman records do I have? Latitude 20, Arthur Lyman, so another Hawaiian record. I think he lived in Hawaii for the bulk of his life. This is an excellent title, Lays of Jazz. So like I said, Hawaiian, really chill, cool, like hang loose man, kind of Hawaiian 50s jazz. So Arthur Lyman, Lays of Jazz. And since I love out of the ordinary Christmas music, I of course had to get his Christmas record, Mele Kalikimaka. Mele Kalikimaka being Merry Christmas in Hawaiian. And he also had, Taboo Volume 2. So this is kind of the most intense, most metal cover. So it's, I think, some sort of shrunken head voodoo doll on the front cover. So this is Taboo Volume 2. So this might not have as much of a Hawaiian flavor to it. So I think that's my Arthur Lyman records. This is a guy named Ed Lyman, The Living End. So this is an unusual Christian record. One of the reasons I have it is it's another one of, so it has a cover version of the Beatles' Help, where the lyrics were redid with a Christian religious focus, but the sound is very unusual because he uses kind of a theater organ, like one of those Hammond organs, with a lot of those rhythm boxes, some of those electronic rhythm boxes that were like crude drum machines in the mid-1960s. So it has a very unusual sound for a Christian record. So this is The Living End by Ed Lyman with Don Wurtzen, accompanist. And the Lyra Sound Constellation. So this one has a sticker on it that said "Seen on ABC's Ripley's Believe It or Not." So this is kind of it's a harp, but it's like a do-it-yourself harp that was built to specifications to make it sound different than an actual harp. And so it has like these very crystalline, new agey, ethereal sounds to it. And it was basically a harp that somebody built. And so that's the last of the L's. And here's a Afro-Cuban jazz with Machito. So it's called Kenya, but it's kind of Afro-Cuban. And Machito is a really good yeah, basically, if you want Latin Afro-Cuban music from the 50s, any record with Machito on it is very good. I think I have another Machito. Yes, I have another Machito record on it. Machito with Flute to Boot. So this is Machito in his Afro-Cuban ensemble accompanied by flute. And I think both of those were on Roulette Records. And here's an album on, it was on a subsidiary of ESP Disc Records. It's Oro Records, and it's a guy named Bruce McKay. So kind of an acid folk record, one of the weirder singer-songwriter types that got associated with the ESP Disc. And then here, Dave McKay and Vicki Hamilton. So this is kind of a jazzy record with little touches of sitar on it. It's on the Impulse label, which was a legendary jazz label that had John Coltrane on it. A lot of the mid-60s stuff from the Impulse label was very interesting. They tried, jazz was losing record sales in the mid-60s, and there were lots of attempts at various crossovers, some of which are actually quite good. So this is Mad River. It's a San Francisco psychedelic band. Some of the psychedelic music they do on here has an almost East Asian tinge to it. I'm told that was actually not intentional, but was the result of slightly speeding up the music on this record. And anyhow, it's just a unique sound. It's got songs like Wind Chimes, War Goes On, so it has like a psychedelic anti-war number on it. It has Amphetamine Gazelle, which is a very hyped up, very fast psychedelic song. And so a very interesting but unheralded psychedelic group from San Francisco, Mad River. What else have we here after Mad River? Madhouse. So this is I love the cover. It's members of the group in really like gigantically high afros meeting with Richard Nixon and Patricia Nixon for tea and coffee. And it's just absolutely bonkers cover. So it's soul funk psychedelic with a little bit of a political message. It's called Serve 'Em by Madhouse. I mean, the cover is killer, absolutely killer. And Madrigal, another psych record, and let's see. Very unusual progressive rock group, Magma. If you're not familiar with them, they're from France, but instead of singing in French or in English, they developed their own invented language called Kobayan, which they would sing all of their songs in. So the name of this band is called Magma, and they're a very, very weird French progressive rock band. Definitely something to get into if you're looking for prog rock that pushes the envelope. Here's another Magma record I have, Voodoo. And so I think that's two Magma records I have. And so this is a record by Michel Mann, M-A-G-N-E, or Mann. It's a French composer, and so he did. So this is a record called Tropical Fantasy, There's actually two versions of it. I have both versions of it. So this is a French version, and it has a slightly, they're exotica records, and this one has a slightly different mix. So it's an exotica record by a French composer. This one has a slightly different mix than the one that was sold in the United States, but the one in the United States is also quite good. And this one, the one in the United States, has this little 3D hologram in the upper left-hand corner. So both very enviable exotica records to get. Here, this is Malleus Maleficarum. Malleus Maleficarum was a book written in medieval times. The title was The Hammer of Witches. It was a guide written in Latin about how to hunt witches if you were a witch hunter. And so this is Malleus Maleficarum on witchcraft, demonology, and exorcism. So definitely a very freaky, creepy, scary spoken word record. Malleus Maleficarum. And now here is a great private press of an all-female band. It's called Maiden Voyage. There's an amazing cover of Roundabout, the song by Yes, that is done by this all-female group. It is amazing, but I mean, that song would make that album amazing just by itself, but there's quite a few other killer tracks on this record. Maiden Voyage. And Hawaiian Dreams by Sam Makia and his Hawaiians. So this is an exotica record I had gotten through garage sales. And here, this is a Canadian sexploitation, exploito psychedelic record. It's by a group called the Maledictus Sound. Very electronic psychedelic instrumentals. But it's a French-Canadian group. But, it's all instrumental, so it doesn't care where they're from, because music is a universal language. Jack Malmsteen and his mod machine. So this is basically an organ record, but it has some nice kind of psychedelic-y, pseudo-psychedelic-y art on the front cover. And this is the Mamzelles. This is another all-women group, and it's their album, It's a Bubblegum World. Very nice album to have. Not really psychedelic. They kind of have their own sound, and it's an all-female kind of lounge act. But they're good musicians. They work well together. And let's see, what do we have? Okay, this is a killer sort of Afro beats late exotica record, Mandingo, the primeval rhythm of life. So it's kind of sort of 50s exotica percussion with Afro funk, made circa 1970. I've heard some people even call it one of the best instrumental records done out of the UK. So it's really good. It's really good. And here are, so I have 3 records from a band called the Mandrake Memorial. The Mandrake Memorial is similar to a lot of electronic-oriented psychedelic bands like 50 Foot Hose, or Lothar and the Hand People, or the Silver Apples. The Mandrake Memorial is definitely of that ilk and very good. They were out of Philadelphia, supposedly they opened up for the Doors, and legend has it they blew the Doors off the stage. So this is their first album, self-titled, the Mandrake Memorial, and then they have 2 other albums. One of them is called Medium, with a very unusual, 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, art on the front cover, and then there is their final album, Puzzle, which has that kind of MC Escher artwork on the front cover. Very nice. So they were an electronic psychedelic band. A guy in the band, Tom Anderton, continued to become an expert on electronic music, and he made some of the first drum machines, some of the first electronic drum machines. Herbie Mann, stone flute. So Herbie Mann, a lot of his 70s records are more common. This is on Embryo Records, which is really cool. Late 60s, early 70s jazz label. If you can find stuff on Embryo Records, that's a very good record to collect, very good record label to collect. So certainly look out for Embryo. And this was a record, Soul of Man by Manfred Mann. So this is the group that did Diddy Wah Diddy, but it's an album they did that was all instrumental. And yeah, it has this amazing flaming skull picture on the front. This record was actually made in Chile, and I found it in a store when I was in Chile. So if you ever get to be in a foreign country for travel or business, do look for where the records are. Man, Switched on Santa. So this is one of the most fun Moog Christmas Carol records, and it has Jean-Jacques Perry, the great Moog synthesizer composer and musician, on it. And here, Daktari, that show is known for Baby Elephant Walk, but this is by a jazz drummer named Shelly Manne. Shelly Manne, he's a very good drummer, very good jazz guy. He usually does more conventional stuff. This is actually kind of like his version of an exotica record, because he was doing it for the show Daktari, which was kind of a medical show that took place in Africa. And this is Marty Manning and his orchestra, The Twilight Zone. So this is orchestral, but it is kind of a space age, outer space music kind of feel to it. And you know The Twilight Zone. If you've seen episodes of the old version of The Twilight Zone, you kind of know what this is going to sound like, and your expectations will be very, very happily fulfilled if you get this record. And let's see, Markley, a group. Markley refers to Bob Markley. Yes, Bob Markley. Bob Markley was the founder of a group called I'm not sure if he was the founder of the group, but Bob Markley was associated with a group called the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band, which was a psychedelic group out of LA of the mid to late 1960s. And Markley is basically a West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band record issued under another name. He kind of tried to have it as a quasi-solo record. So it's called Markley, a group. And oh God, we know who this guy is. Charles Manson. This is actually a record that was recorded by Charles Manson and his members of his Manson family. And it was done before he and those family members committed all those murders. And so it was influenced by the psychedelic music of the day, although since they were, cultists living out in the desert with no real money, it's mostly acoustic stuff and sort of the Manson family women doing backup vocals, and it is very crazy music. Manson kind of came from Appalachia, and he was kind of very poor, so some of this has almost an Americana feel to it, yet also being psychedelic and insane and acid fried and just completely, totally weird. But yes, this is Lie, the Love and Terror Cult by Charles Manson and his Manson family. And it is, it's a crazy record. Crazy. Michael Mantler, he's a jazz guy. I think he's a jazz guy or jazz or progressive rock guy out of the UK. One of the great things about this cover is the cover has artwork by Edward Gorey, the great Edward Gorey, on it. And Michael Mantler, I have some other Michael Mantler records. The Marble Arch Orchestra, this was released in the U.S. on Liberty Records, but the Marble Arch Orchestra, I believe, is a UK easy listening outfit. So this has a lot of, I think mostly, it has some American top 40 hits on it, but a lot of UK top 40 hits from the psychedelic era on it. And over here, I have a bunch of records from Marcy. Marcy, aka Little Marcy. Marcy is a ventriloquist puppet, and Little Marcy was the puppet associated with a woman named Marcy Tigner. And the Little Marcy puppet when I first listened to these records, they sounded really crazy to me because the sound coming out of the ventriloquist dummy is sort of an adult Christian's view of what an angelic, childlike voice is supposed to sound like, which can also sound slightly creepy. But the thing is, I later learned Marcy Tigner's voice is actually like that. So she wasn't like putting up a front. That is authentically her voice. She has a voice. She's like one of those women who, like, they're 50 or 60 or 70 and they still can't get rid of having like a completely childlike baby doll voice. And so she made a series of Christian records with her ventriloquist dummy alter ego Little Marcy. So this is Marcy Sings, and Marcy Sings Nursery Rhymes, and Little Marcy with the Animals. So I have a bunch of Little Marcy records, but there are a lot more. There's like 30 or 40 of them. It's a ridiculous number of Little Marcy records. Like, if you really wanted to collect them all, you could be collecting for a very long time. Here, Arif Mardin, Glass Onion. So this has a great cover of the Beatles' Glass Onion. Arif Mardin was kind of I think a keyboard guy, basically a jazz guy, kind of late 60s jazz guy. So I've heard some people call it acid jazz, or it ending up on compilations of stuff that gets labeled acid jazz after the fact. So if you like that sort of thing, you might like this Arif Mardin, Glass Onion. And Sonny Moresco, Sounds of Sonny. This is a hard to find record. It's a guy who played organ at a local roller rink, and he released it as a self-released private press record. It has Little Willie. So the song by Sweet, the group that did Ballroom Blitz and all those other songs, he does one of their songs, Little Willie, on this. A very nice mariachi band, Mariachi Vargas de Tekalan. I have this because they have a cover version of the Beatles' The Fool on the Hill on this record. And here's Mariano and the Unbelievables. Mariano was, I believe, a classically trained musician out of Argentina, and they marketed him as part of this group, Mariano and the Unbelievables, which basically was one of those groups that tried to do contemporary top 40 songs in a Baroque classical style. So I already have showed you a couple of groups from my collection that are in that style. There's the 18th Century Concepts, the Horsehairs is another, and this one is one, Mariano and the Unbelievables. And here's a much nicer copy of their second album. It's actually, I think, a harder album to find. Mariano and the Unbelievables' 25th Hour has a cover version of Green Tambourine. I love cover versions of that song. And yeah, it's definitely sort of Baroque classical psychedelia. And let's see, this is an Italian, a very political, left-wing political record that's, I think, part Italian, part English. I picked up somewhere. I remember listening to it, but I don't remember much about it. But, you know, sometimes you just, you look at something and you see it has an interesting cover and you get it, and you just have to experiment. Orienta, the Marco Polo Adventurers. So this is a great, Asian-flavored exotica record with a lot of gongs and percussion on it. So Orienta by the Marco Polo Adventurers, a really great cover. Definitely the very beautiful women on these exotica records on the cover. Certainly, I mean, I think they should have beautiful women or handsome guys on a record cover more often. You know, they should go back to that. Oh, this is Marco Melkon and his International Oriental Orchestra. So this is another Oriental flavored, but I guess supposed to be Middle Eastern flavored, belly dancing flavored exotica record. So Marco Melkon. And so this is a 1980s new wave record. Marcus, It's About Time. The guy on the front cover is trying way too hard to look cool, and it has a cover version of the Beatles' Help on it. So I like it when I can find new wave synthy versions of Beatles covers on them. Let's see what else. That was Mardell, The Mystery of Love. So this is a very, I like female singer-songwriters with a very idiosyncratic viewpoint, and this is one of those records. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. So the artist on this one is Charles Martin. So, you mainly notice the title Desiderata. So Desiderata was a minor hit circa 1969, 1970. It was a hit by I think a DJ by the name of Les Crane, and it had like, you are a child of the universe. You have every right to be here. And it was a spoken word track, and it was an unexpected hit, circa 1969, circa 1970. And this was a budget label release that tried to cash in on it. I bought this for like 50 cents at a book fair, where basically they were selling a bunch of just random records in boxes for very, very cheap. This is great. maybe not the whole record, but there's an amazing track on it called I Am Music. So this is kind of, I've heard it called the one-track wonder, but sometimes if you can get a record cheap, but there's like one track that's absolutely amazing on it, you should get it. Because sometimes one good song on a record is more than a lot of records have. So, but I think I like the other stuff on this one too. So, but I've heard other people call it a one-track wonder, but that one track is just amazing. I Am Music is just great. And this is a naughty record. I know what he wants for Christmas, but I don't know how to rap it. Kay Martin and Her Bodyguards. So this is one of these what they used to call stag party records. So they'd be records where dudes would hang out and tell dirty jokes, and they'd put on a record, have dirty jokes, and maybe have a woman with her boobs out on the front cover, although in this case her boobs are covered up by a strategically placed red ribbon. But yes, so this is I Know What He Wants for Christmas, but I don't know how to wrap it. She's talking about wrapping herself or unwrapping, maybe she's unwrapping his package for Christmas. Maybe that's the present. Anywho, yes, very saucy record. Salvatore Martirano, LGA for Gassed Masked Politico, Helium Bomb, and 2-channel tape. Yeah, this is like, these guys are very arch Italian experimental guys, probably very left wing, and they did this experimental avant-garde piece. So I like experimental avant-garde music, but I don't know if it necessarily reaches the masses all that much. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody for liking this stuff. I just like what I like. But here we go. Mary Jane. So Mary Jane, this is another one of those 1960s druggy exploitation movies that had its own soundtrack. There's also a very nice Mrs. Miller song on this record. I'll probably tell you a little bit more about Mrs. Miller when I finally get into the ends. But some really good stuff. And, okay, so the Emancipation of Hugh Masekela. This is, Hugh Masekela is a trumpeter. He's, I think, best known for Grazing in the Grass. He did the instrumental version of Grazing in the Grass. He brought a lot of African music to the United States. And so this one's called The Emancipation of Hugh Masekela. Although this one has a lot of his singing, and he's not as good of a singer as he is a trumpet player. But you know, sometimes I like to hear bad singing, just because for the hell of it. But here's another. So this is another Hugh Masekela record. I think there's another one I really want to get called Henzole Sounds. That's supposed to be really interesting rhythmically, but I don't have that. Masque d'Afrique, Mask of Africa. So I think this is on. It's on Delphi. Delphi was a label that was active in the 1950s, early 60s. They had Richie Valens on that record label. I think they had Bobby Fuller 4. My Eden Abez record is on Delphi, and so is this very, very sweet exotica record, Masque d'Afrique. And let's see, Gran Fiesta Gran, Don Mateo y Su Chingana. I think this is something I picked up. It's like a party record I picked up when I was in Chile. So 1960s party record. And then Milt Matthews Incorporated, For the People. So for For some strange reason, this has a cover version of the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night on it, but it's mostly like straight ahead funk record. And Harvey Matuso's Jews Harp Band. This is a record called The War Between Fats and Thins. Harvey Matuso was a really interesting guy. Harvey Matuso used to be a guy who worked for Senator Joseph McCarthy. So he was a guy who used to be in the Communist Party, and then he started working for the right-wing Senator Joseph McCarthy, and he started becoming an anti-communist and like red-baited a bunch of people. And then eventually he got an attack of conscience or something and said, hey, I've been lying about these people. I've been lying and saying some people are communists when they're not really communists, and I really regret it. And what they did was, when he started telling the truth, they indicted him for perjury. So he was pretty much hated by both left-wing people and right-wing people in the United States. So he eventually ended up going to England and reinventing himself as this hippie, like this old guru to the hippies in the UK, kind of like an Allen Ginsberg figure. And he actually made a record about it called The War Between Fats and Thins. And it's as weird as you might expect coming out of those circumstances. So, very interesting story behind this record. If you're looking for very unusual stuff, not even your straight psychedelia, but just something really unusual, and you're thinking, like, how did they get that released on a record label? This is one of those records. And Buddy Max. This is a guy who did kind of country records that he would release himself out of Florida. So he's definitely kind of a Florida man guy, but he's kind of a very sweet-tempered guy. I think his voice is a little, kind of like this. And, he just writes these happy songs like Roller Skating Cowboy or Elizabeth the Christmas Queen. And so he's almost like a country and western Jonathan Richman or country and western Daniel Johnston. Like he's just a cool guy. He's kind of a harmless guy who likes to write like kooky songs. So very hard to find his record, or maybe it's hard to find. Maybe they're easy to find in Florida. I don't know. I don't go to Florida often enough, but I did find one of them, and I feel glad to have it. Mavi İşçiler, that is a Turkish group. Unfortunately, this is not an original. It's a reissue. It would be very, very expensive if it were an original. But very solid Turkish beat group. So I guess they were kind of the Beatles of Turkey, to the extent that Turkey has a Beatles. So if the Turkey had a Beatles, it would be Mavi İşçiler. And that's that group. And this one is a record I find very, very, very underrated. It's named Maximilian, and it's like three dudes. It's three light-skinned black dudes. One of them actually kind of looks a little like Prince, several years ahead of time. Three light-skinned black dudes that are crucified on crosses made of flowers. So the cover is absolutely insane. And I like the music. It's kind of like this very raw, ragged, punky blues psych, which it reminds me a lot of Arthur Lee. Arthur Lee was the lead singer of Love, and what was distinctive about Arthur Lee's voice is that he was a black man who sang like a white man singing like a black man. Like basically Arthur Lee would like try to imitate Mick Jagger because he was black, and he could have been just a black guy singing like a black guy, but he chose to sing like a black guy singing like a white guy singing like a black guy. And basically all the guys in this group sing like black guys who are trying to sing like white guys singing like black guys, which makes it just cooler. I don't know. I just find it weird for that reason, but also it's kind of sloppy blues punk psych. Some people call it amateurish. I like the sloppy and raw flavor to it. So your mileage may vary, but Maximilian on ABC Records, I think it is a very underrated album. And let's see. Oh, a very seminal group, a proto-punk group, the MC5. So this is their second album, MC5, back in the USA, when they tried to go a more 1950s rootsy direction. But and then this is their third album, because I'm having them in like alphabetical, not chronological order. This is their third album, High Time. And in addition to those two, you got, it's the debut. So if you gotta have one MC5 record, you gotta have the debut record, Kick Out the Jams. And there's several versions of this record. It was a very scandalous record in this day. The original press said, "Kick out the jams, Mother Hubbards," except they didn't say Hubbards, they said an F-derived word. And "Kick out the jams, Mother Funkers." And so that was the original press of the album. Later presses, such as the one I have "Kick Out the Jams, Brothers and Sisters." So, but it's a real feather in your cap if you can get the uncensored first pressing of this. But even so, this is very, very kick-ass proto-punk. It's definitely coming out of a psych era, so there's still psychedelic tinges to it, but they're definitely like a hard R&B, garage rock, proto-punk feel to it as well. And let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, this is a very nice, so this is one of those records associated with the monster craze of the 1950s. Bob McFadden and Dorr. Dorr, D-O-R, was actually Rod McKuen, the beatnik poet, so he was participating in this. It's basically a novelty record. Songs are Mummy, M-U-M-M-Y, taught us. So a very interesting record, associated with the monster craze of the 50s and 60s. And all right, Gary McFarland, the In Sound. So this is kind of a Latin samba-esque, easy listening record. It's chill, it's chill. Put it on when you want to chill, And here's another of Gary McFarland's records, Soft Samba. So if you're looking for some kind of a Brazil bossa nova samba, Latin, easy listening feel, something to chill you out, that's definitely something you can go for. All right. Now this, I felt so lucky when I finally found a copy of this about a year or two ago. The Dream World of Dion McGregor. He talks in his sleep. So the cover is great because the illustration on the cover, the drawing on the cover, is done by the great Edward Gorey. There's not a lot of album covers that are done by him, so it's very much in demand for that reason. But the title is basically what the record is about, The Dream World of Dion McGregor. So the guy who put this record out had a roommate named Dion McGregor, And this Dion McGregor guy would talk in his sleep. And so the guy basically put a microphone on and recorded what the guy would say when he talked in his sleep. And I don't know if you talk in his sleep, but when this guy talked in his sleep, it's like the ramblings of a mental patient. And so he had this, it's basically like a wall-to-wall, basically it's a record of a guy talking in his sleep. And you think that wouldn't work, but evidently this guy was most creative when he was asleep. And so that's the only time he ever got to make an album, was when some guy recorded him when he was talking in his sleep. But yes, this is it. The dream world of Dion McGregor, just an amazing concept. I love records based on amazing concepts, and that they commit to the concept and never give up committing to that concept. If you have a bit, commit to the bit. And I found this. Yeah, I've already played it. I think I found it sealed, but it's the original Macintosh, and it's a very nice contemporary classical music record, and it has some very nice toy piano on it. It has some toy piano playing on it, which I find amusing. You don't find a lot of records with a toy piano on it. And let's see, what else do we have? Mark McKinley, an analysis of the cry language of babies. So this is another record, field recording record on folkways. I think partially it's used to teach, obstetricians and midwives about what babies sound like when they cry, and like how you can learn about, what kinds of cries mean different things. So I like to have these weird spoken word records, as you probably already figured out. And then I think I've come to the end where I have my Rod McKuen record. So this is Rod McKuen. He was the same guy that was part of Bob McFadden and Dorr. And Rod McKuen has a lot of records. He had a lot of basically spoken word poetry records. They're actually not that hard to find. The guy was kind of hippie, kind of part of a transitional figure from beatnik to hippie to new age. And this one is a record called Beatsville. It's pretty ahead of its time. Like he has a bit on here about hallucinogenic Mexican mushrooms, even though the record is from like 1961 maybe, or 1962. I mean, and it's just the cover is supposed to be like this beatnik cafe, and there's just this woman staring at you from the front cover with these amazingly smoky eyes. Another one of those great covers from the late 50s, early 60s that had a beautiful woman as its selling point on the cover. And here we go. Here's another Rod McKuen. This one has a more abstract psychedelic feel to the cover. Kind of uses the same lettering that those psychedelic concert posters had in San Francisco. This is Rod McKuen takes a San Francisco hippie trip. And that's what he does. So he does a bunch of poems. So this is about where he's transitioned from the beatnik into the hippie era. And he does a bunch of poems, recites them on this record, and talks about it. So that's what he does. So cool guy. Some of his records are cool. They're kind of inconsistent. But Hippie Trip and Beatsville, these are probably two of the top Rod McKuen records to get. So you need to be selective with Rod McKuen, but I guess some of them are cheap. So I think if you're in the mood for some sort of beatnik hippie new agey poetry, and you want something cheap, and you see it in like a thrift store or something, yeah, maybe pick it up. But if you're looking for some of the higher value stuff in his body of work, Beatsville and San Francisco, Rod McKuen takes the San Francisco hippie trip. These are part of the top two. And so it ends with Rod McKuen